All right, so we continue with the muscle cells. We are saying the functions of the muscle cells is to simply contract in order to produce movement. Now, what features, what adaptations do the muscle cells have in order to perform their function? Number one, there is an abundance of mitochondria to release energy for contraction. And we say this mitochondria is simply the powerhouse of the cell, which helps to make energy available in form of ATP, right? And then apart from the abundance of mitochondria, we have the presence of the actin and the myosin filaments in the cytoplasm, which helps to carry out contraction. So which ones are carrying out contraction? It is the actin and myosin, and this contraction is helping to produce movement. So examples of muscle cells, we have those muscles which we find in the heart. So those we find in the heart are the cardiac muscle cells. Those that we find in our skeletal region there, we call them the skeletal muscle cells. And we also have the smooth muscle cell, which we find in our stomach and in our intestines. All right. So now, let's move on to another specialized cell, which is the red blood cell. So these red blood cells are also known as erythrocytes. And these erythrocytes, the function is to transport oxygen and small amounts of carbon dioxide. Now, what adaptations, what features does the red blood cells have to perform their function? Number one, there is a biconcave disc shape which helps to increase the surface area for the diffusion of oxygen. Apart from that, there is the presence of a red pigment that we call hemoglobin, which has a high affinity or attraction for oxygen. So hemoglobin combines with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. Now, when oxygen concentration are high in the lungs, okay, that is when oxygen concentration is high in the lungs, we are going to have oxygen combining with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Now when the oxygen concentration is low in the muscles, we have oxyhemoglobin, which is going to dissociate or decompose in order to form hemoglobin and oxygen. So this is our equation. We have hemoglobin plus oxygen in the lungs, that is going to form oxyhemoglobin. Now we said that when the oxygen concentrations are low in the muscles, what is going to happen? This oxyhemoglobin is going to dissociate to form oxygen as well as hemoglobin. So another adaptation which the red blood cells have to perform their function is they do not have the presence of the nucleus, and this makes more room for hemoglobin. So quickly through the adaptations again, we have said there is a biconcave disc shape. Apart from the biconcave disc shape, the presence of a red pigment called hemoglobin and absence of the nucleus. So this is our structure of a red blood cell, and we say this red blood cell has what gives it the red color. We call that hemoglobin, and hemoglobin has a high attraction for oxygen. So oxygen is going to be attached to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is found in our red blood cell, and then it is going to be transported to the lungs, right? So let's move on to another specialized cell. So another specialized cell that we have is the nerve cell. So this nerve cell is also known as a neuron. So what is the function of the neurons? So the function of the neurons is to conduct electrical impulses or nerve impulses from one part of the body to another. Now, what adaptations, what features do these neurons have to perform their function? So number one, there is the presence of the dendrites that collect impulses from neighboring cells. So the dendrites are the ones that are collecting impulses from the neighboring cells. So when we quickly rush through our neurons, we are able to see these structures, all right? So we call them the dendrites. So these dendrites are the ones that are collecting electrical impulses from the neighboring cells. Apart from that, number 2, we have the presence of the axon that carries impulses from one end of the neuron to another. All right, so that is our axon, the structure inside there. That is our axon. And we are saying the axon helps to carry impulses from one end of the neuron to another. Apart from that, there is also the presence of the synaptic knob that forms a link with other neurons. Okay. Apart from that, we also have the presence of the nodes of Ranvier that makes electrical impulses to move faster. So we have our nodes of Ranvier, the structure which is there, that is our myelin sheath. We have our cell body inside there, and we have these structures which are the dendrites, and finally we have the synaptic knob. And then when we talk about this kind of a neuron, this one is a motor neuron, and we know the function of the motor neuron. This one collects electrical impulses from the central nervous system, which is the brain, to the effectors, and the effectors are the muscles. And then this neuron, which is on the middle, is known as the sensory neuron. The sensory neuron helps to collect electrical impulses from the sensory receptors to the central nervous system, which is the brain, for interpretation. Then this neuron which is here is the relay neuron, which simply acts as an interneuron, or the connector between the sensory neuron and the relay neuron. So that is just a quick summary on the neurons. We can now move on to the white blood cells. So these white blood cells are cells that defend the body against diseases. So these white blood cells are also known as leukocytes. And then these white blood cells, the examples of white blood cells that we have the phagocytes and the lymphocytes. So the phagocytes, the function of the phagocytes is to defend the body against infection by engulfing and digesting the germs or any foreign bodies. So what adaptations do these phagocytes have to carrying out their function? Number 1, the presence of a lobed nucleus, which makes engulfing of the germ to be easy. Apart from that, there is an amoeboid movement which makes it possible for them to move towards the germs. Apart from that, they also have no fixed shape but can change their shapes, making engulfing of the foreign bodies possible. All right, so we can be able to see this structure, which is our lobed nucleus. So how do we distinguish a phagocyte from a lymphocyte? So when we talk about a lymphocyte as a type of a white blood cell, so the function is to defend the body against infection by producing antibodies and antitoxins. Remember we said for the phagocytes, it engulfs or it eats, it swallows the germs or microorganisms. But for the lymphocytes, they produce antibodies and antitoxins. So these antibodies are proteins that destroys the germs and the foreign bodies, while antitoxins are proteins that neutralize poisons from the germs. Now, what adaptations do the lymphocytes have to carrying out their function? Number 1, we have the presence of a large nucleus and a thin cytoplasm. So we are able to see one big nucleus. So when we see one big round nucleus like that, we have to know to say we are dealing with a lymphocyte, which simply produces antibodies and antitoxins. Let's now talk about the guard cells. So the guard cells simply helps in the closing. They control the size of the stomata, and the adaptations that they have is that they occur in pairs which are semicircular, and when turgid they become straight, and when they are turgid they are semicircular or curved. When they are plasmolized, they become straight. I had to notice that one. So their cell walls are thicker around the stoma than anywhere else. This makes it possible for the stoma to open and absorb water. So this is our guard cell, it's open, which becomes turgid. This is our guard cell, which is straight,